All right, here we are. So thank you again for everybody showing up. I love seeing everybody's faces here. As we all know, the first time in almost a decade that Tacoma is going to elect a new mayor. That's a big deal. So I'm super excited that we get to host this forum and hear from the candidates and I'm going to be asking some questions. They're going to do an intro. They'll both get a couple minutes to answer each. We're just going to go back and forth. If we do have time, we will take some questions that we have on note cards and possibly online. But we only have about an hour, so it's probably going to go by pretty quick. So just let you guys know. And Anders Ibsen and John Hines, for anybody that doesn't know. Sorry. Sometimes I forget about that part. Here's the microphone. Yes, a lot of cords. Okay, so first question. Oh, there you go. Intro.
All right. Hello, good evening. I'll just talk loud. Is this on?
Yeah, it's for people on.
Okay, fair enough. Well, there we go, tech stuff. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's really exciting seeing so many people here. My name is Anders Ibsen. Very honored to run for to be your mayor. And it's wonderful being able to connect with so many people all throughout this campaign. A little bit about me. I'm a lifelong Tacoma resident, born and raised here at TG in central Tacoma. Born and raised, I went to school here and had the privilege of serving on the city council for 8 years from 2012 to 2019, working on everything from worker justice issues, housing issues, environmental issues, and so forth in partnership with the community. My campaign actually started in central Tacoma. The first door I ever hit was 1901 Sprague Avenue, January 2nd. So there's the auspicious note here for central. So why am I running? So that's the question that a lot of people give me, along with how are you running too. That's a different question. Simply put, what I tell people is I love Tacoma like a family member, because who else but your family can inspire the same amounts of joy and frustration, I've been here long enough to see some of the really epic, amazing things Tacoma has done, like being a kid who briefly went to Stadium and then Soda, like knowing when the aroma of Tacoma was there because of the pulp mill, and now no more aroma, and actually seeing what transpired with the waterfront and actually being there when they blew up the smokestack, for example, and now seeing what's gone there in its place, and seeing some of the amazing developments that we've both witnessed and led on, including some of the issues I was proud to have led on and participated with, like the push for our successful paid sick and safe leave ordinance, which became the basis for state law, helping hundreds of thousands of people in Washington state, and also seeing what we've seen with our discussion with the Tide Flats community and protecting our industrial areas from further fossil fuel expansion, for example, and paving the way for the jobs of the future, for instance. Those are the cool things. They're the things that are just as frustrating, not just simply to me, but the people I've had the privilege of meeting with at the doors, include the persistent problems with public safety, homelessness, and also just basic functioning of city government. People are really hungry for leadership, for basic accountability, responsiveness, and us just meaning what we say and following through and giving people restored trust and credibility. That's what I'm passionate about, and looking forward to your questions.
Gonna get all the way over here. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Hines. I am the current city council member for District 1, which is the west end and north end of the city of Tacoma. It's the area that Anders represented before I took his spot on the council. I've been there for the last 5 years. Also a lifelong Tacoman. I grew up on the south end, though. I went to Lincoln High School, Stewart Middle School, Stewart Elementary School, and come from a pretty working class background, but very excited to be here today to talk about Tacoma. The reason I'm running for Tacoma is I think we've done a lot of good work in the last 5 years. Has been on the city council. We've taken on tough issues, housing, homelessness, the Tide Flats, COVID-19, which I think some people want to put in the rearview mirror, but was a real big part of my council experience. I had 8 meetings in person before COVID hit, and then spent a lot of my time kind of working our way through that. Since I've been on the council, I've taken a lot of tough issues. I've been out on the front on really hard conversations, discussions, which I'm looking forward for your questions. So here we go, here on out. I think the reason I'm running is because I think right now, more than ever, we need a steady hand leading the city government. We need someone who's dependable, honest, trustworthy, who's been at the forefront for the whole time and can really continue to kind of lead the city going forward. Areas of focus I've been talking about is a really kind of a back to the basics idea. Public safety, how do we make sure that every city, every resident, every community is safe? And that safety means lots of things, but that's what we want to start with first. Number two, it's about housing and homelessness. How do we make sure that fewer people are living on our streets and more people have a place to live and a roof over their heads? And then finally, it's about jobs and economic development. How do we make sure that more people in this community have jobs that pay the wages, that can give them the homes that they want to raise families in, that they want to be part of? We want to be a city where people want to start a business, run a business, grow old, and find a place in the community. And that's what I'm committed to. And I'm very excited about taking the opportunity to chat with you all more about my vision and thoughts and ideas as we go ahead.
I will ask you the first question.
Yes.
And if I need to repeat the question when it comes to either of you, that's fine. Just let me know. Since Tacoma has a weak mayor system, how do you see your role as mayor in shaping Tacoma's future? And what initiatives or policy changes do you plan to champion to move our city forward despite those structural limitations?
2 minutes. All right. Yes. I spent a lot of time I'm a former teacher. I say educating, talking to people about the fact that we have a unique mayor system where we separately elect the mayor, but the mayor just sits on the council. So what it means is the mayor's job is being the captain of the team. They're the one who has to lead the team. They're the help to set the agenda. They have to work with their colleagues to pull things across the finish line. As I say every time, it doesn't matter what the mayor wants to do if the mayor doesn't have 4 people that want to go along with them on it. So it's really critical that we have a mayor who can work with their colleagues on policy and develop them and bring them forward. And so I think for the mayor and my vision of it going forward is one, being very clearly working with my colleagues to understand their issues, what they'd like to see, and help more of their policies get across the finish line. I see my job as more of a coach, right? It's helping my colleagues and myself getting there. I think further than that, I think the mayor also really has a distinct role as kind of being the visible representation of the city. So I take it very seriously. I'll be spending a lot of time in the city, talking to communities, understanding what's going on, getting a good idea. We hear a lot at the council meetings right now, but I think we could have even more of a dialogue with our public, not so much a monologue. I think one of the problems or frustrations I have with the city right now is that it feels very monologue. You come and talk to us, we talk back at you. You talk at us, we talk back at you. There's not a dialogue. And COVID really hurt that because we lost that opportunity to talk. So as the mayor, not only leading the team, but really finding ways, reimagining community forum, reimagining how we're out in the community and talking to folks to lead to more dialogue and less monologue is what I'd like to see as next mayor.
So to restate the question, this is about the role and the basic priorities. So we don't really have a pure manager council system either. I mean, it's more of like a weird hybrid, right? Where the mayor is separately elected, but is also a voting member. But in practice, the mayor does set the agenda, but also has a lot of procedural influence. And I think one of the ways that's most relevant to you guys is how that's going to look for very big decisions like the selection of the new city manager. That's going to be very crucial. That's the one employee that the city council has collectively, and that person hires and supervises all the city staff. So making sure that not only is this a highly motivated, qualified person who gets it and who can follow not just the council's policy, but the community's dialogue, but also someone who sets a great culture and builds the morale and credibility within the organization as well. Because there's been everything from the 2 failed levies that we've seen. Like I've known people who are very big supporters of public safety and streets and so forth who didn't feel comfortable supporting the road levy, didn't feel comfortable supporting the fire levy, for example, just because of the lack of trust that they've seen in how they feel the city is going to manage the money or just what they are going to expect. And so having someone who can really set the tone and really begin the long process of rebuilding credibility, both within the organization and in the community, I think that's something that the mayor, as well as the people that the mayor hires and helps the council hire, is essential. So getting the culture right is going to be imperative, and that's going to inform all the major issues, such as working more collaboratively and constructively on a higher, more regionalized approach to homelessness. So it's not just 98405, 98402, taking on a region's issues, for example, doing that more sustainably in conjunction with the county, our state partners, surrounding jurisdictions. I mean, remember when there was a News Tribune story about how the Puyallup PD's stated written policy was dropping people they picked off to the Tacoma Rescue Mission? Does anyone remember that? So that's not going to happen any further, right? I mean, we not only can we no longer accept that, but we have to speak more frankly, honestly, and collaboratively, because especially with the growing federal instability, we need each other more than ever as a region, and the mayor has to lead there.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Tacoma continues to grow, but many residents worry about being left behind. How will you ensure that economic development benefits longtime residents and small businesses, not just outside investors and large corporations?
Excellent question. So I'm proud to be labor endorsed for that very reason. I have over 20 unions supporting that campaign, my campaign, because from the beginning of my political career, I have believed firmly that the role of the labor movement, of government as a whole, is to make sure that the rising tide lifts all the boats. That's what defines my politics and my own personal principles. And how we get there, and both the limitations as well as the opportunity of a city, of a municipal government, is that we can't control the economy, but we can set the table. We can set the conditions really well that allow us to win as best as we can with our comparative advantages. So for example, we're realistically probably not going to ever be a tech hub, at least the same level as like the East Side, and not our East Side, but the Sammamish East Side, right? Bellevue, or even Seattle, right? But can we better leverage our fiber in the ground to try other things that haven't even been created yet, right? We have 2 manufacturing centers. We're the only place in the I-5 corridor that has not just 1, but 2, because we keep forgetting about Nally Valley. How can we, in conjunction with our environmental goals, partner with the Port of Tacoma, the tribe, our industry partners to grow sectors in which we have an actual comparative advantage in, and make sure that we can marry that to our educational resources, like the new Port Maritime Center down at the port, for example. Like this is literally a skilled trades pipeline coming from the K-12 system. I mean, there's some very exciting things coming down the pike if properly leveraged, but also it comes down to policy. So you can't escape the housing aspect. I mean, that's such an example of this winner take all, dog eat dog, very flawed zero-sum thinking. And I'm a realtor, and I can tell you that, right? That so much of it is a game of people winning at the expense of the current people, and we shouldn't have to accept that. So looking at our housing policies so that we're not simply increasing the amount of housing, but really the bottlenecks that are impairing families who are trying to rent here, as well as first-time home buyers, so that people don't have to wait until they're 40 to buy their first home, for example, and so that when we grow an opportunity, everyone can benefit, not just some.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes. Tacoma continues to grow, but many residents worry about being left behind. How will you ensure that economic development benefits longtime residents and small businesses, not just outside investors and large corporations?
Okay, so I think there's a couple pieces to that. So number one is first of all, kind of growing this future economy we want to see. So I'm a public school teacher, I'm an educator. So I think a lot about how are we building more opportunities for young people in our community to kind of get the skills they need to take on these jobs of the future, right? So that's either kind of working with our community and technical colleges, it's working with our K-12 schools, which I work in every day. Maritime Skills Center is a great example. IDEA is another good example of getting students, young people, the skills they need to transition into these 21st century jobs. So that's how we grow the labor pool here. I think when we do that, and when we do that, we have a group of people that can move into the trades, that can move into these jobs, and we have a pool. One analogy I heard was, years ago, people followed the factory. Now the factory follows the people. And so if we have a skilled workforce here, if people who have the skills to take on, the jobs will come, right? And I think we look at our Port of Tacoma, our JBLM, these kind of economic engines, and how do we kind of build out some of the industries that support that work already. So then when the people have the skills and the jobs show up, they can go into those and they work into those. I think another piece of this, which wasn't mentioned, was just like thinking about the current small businesses we have and how do we help them grow? I think one thing we can talk about attracting people from the outside, which I think your question got to, but I think I want to talk more, and as the mayor lead more on, is how do we help a small business go from a small business to a larger business? How do we help a mid-sized business go from a mid-sized business to a larger business? How do we grow the next big business here in the city of Tacoma that's homegrown and part of our community? We used to have big companies that grew out of here. We don't have those as much anymore. So we have to think about what's missing in that pipeline to grow. And I think that's bigger than just downtown. That's every business district. That's every part of the city. We want businesses to grow and thrive. And I think the mayor needs to really step into that and say, what are the bottlenecks at helping these businesses grow? How are we making sure that we have the workforce and that the people who are already doing the work continue to thrive and find success and help be part of that future for Tacoma? That's my question.
Rising housing costs and homelessness remain pressing challenges. What specific strategies or partnerships would you prioritize to expand affordable housing options and provide effective, compassionate resources for our unhoused neighbors while also dealing with a deficit in the budget?
Taking any suggestions on that one? No. Let me begin by saying where we've been, and then I'll talk about where we're going. Where have we been? Since I've been on the council, we passed Home in Tacoma, which allowed more housing types up and down the housing marketplace. So the goal is we're going to see more housing being built that's going to be more affordable at different price points. Also, since I've been on the council, we passed the 1/10 of 1% sales tax for affordable housing. We're investing millions of dollars through our housing trust fund in building affordable and permanently supportive housing in this community to really help those folks that are really struggling and really need a lot of support to gain housing. So helping with supply with Home in Tacoma, investing to make sure there's more. And then I think beyond that, we also need to think about how we move people from streets into shelter and housing and on with their lives. And so I think that is, as Anders mentioned, we need to have a bigger regional conversation around that. The city of Tacoma has really taken the lead on addressing homelessness and housing in our county. And I look forward to partnering with our county executive of how we can make this more of a regional issue. Because if you look at the numbers, there are not many, but there are many people in our community who became last known address was outside of the city of Tacoma, and then they're here. Why are they here? Because we have always committed to providing shelter and housing to folks. 80% of the shelter in Pierce County is inside the city of Tacoma. We really need to shift that and get more cities taking on responsibility for that, because you are better served if you are from Gig Harbor and become homeless in Gig Harbor to get shelter and services in Gig Harbor. You're not better served coming to the city of Tacoma. We will help you, but we need more of the cities around us to take on that load and help us be part of that, and take an approach where they want to be like us, offering shelter and housing to folks, giving them resources, not pushing them off into Tacoma where the resources are. And so that is a big regional conversation we're going to have as the mayor's going to have. And I think the work we've already done with Home in Tacoma and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund are going to really set the ground for really taking this problem on.
All right, so we're going to solve homelessness in 2 minutes. You saw it here first, right? So, good job, Don. I'm going to start by giving you some mixed messages, right? So the first is the city has made some laudable progress. I mean, I was there when we literally declared homelessness a public emergency. We allocated some of the first money for the tiny home villages, one of which John and I both live next to on 6th and Orchard, for example. And it's been the neighbors like it, right? It's actually done some really good work. I was there and we voted to initially vote for the 10th of 1% mental health chemical dependency tax to go towards these services. And the city during that time has also led on some really good issues, like the inclusion of co-responders, of licensed mental health professionals to assist our officers, of the HOPE team, the HEAL team, community service officers to assist in a not as lethal a potential way with the community. So these are good steps. Where the failure is, and that's where the mix comes in, is what's the next step? The next bit is coherency. That's by far the biggest problem that a lot of experts in the mental health field, people who are talking about what the city needs to work more on when it comes to homelessness, is actual follow through and integration. So and it's ambiguous, and I think the average person understands that. I mean, on the one hand, we don't want to go back to where Yakima Avenue and People's Park were just a few years ago, right? At the same time, talk to anyone who lives in Central, the East Side, the South End, and they all more or less say some variation of the same thing of, they moved the encampment and they just popped up in the alley back there, right? It's just this human ping pong, right? Because there's the policy, but where's the follow through? Where's the actual services attached to it? And where's our neighbor, a more regionally focused approach to actually help people coming from the different areas? So the funding conversation is part of that, obviously. There's no escaping it. But I think before we do that, people have to have faith that there's a real plan, that there's actual follow through. And finally, what I will say also to improving our process is we really need to stop painting with such a broad brush with housing instability, because the needs and the strategies pertaining to people living in tents who are addicted to fentanyl and self-medicating their schizophrenia away are totally different from the 1 in 10 housing insecure kids at Lincoln High School to the invisible working class who are working 3 jobs and serving couches. They all need totally different strategies, and we need to stop painting with a broad brush.
Public safety is top of mind for many, but community members also call for approaches rooted in compassion and equity. What does a safe Tacoma look like to you, and how will you balance accountability with prevention, trust building?
So for me, it all comes down to what safety means. So if we're solely talking about law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement is an absolutely crucial part of that puzzle. Before my time with the city council, I worked with Safe Streets, and it was my privilege working with our two sector and other sector CLOs. I think Tacoma actually has a very pioneering history with community policing, and it's time, I think, to really redouble on that, because everything from groups like Hilltop Action Coalition, Safe Streets, they've really led the way, and very, very much of that kind of Kennedy ethic of service, of not just looking to the government, but what can people do to really put that service ethic forward. So as mayor, I would definitely try to push that. But for me, safety is more than just responding to a problem. It's having a livable neighborhood. So the best example I can think of is consider areas like Point Defiance, for example, which, granted, we've seen some very scary things happen there recently, but they're so noteworthy because of how rare they are. I mean, this is 650 acres of old growth forest, and I go running there. I take my kid there all the time. Where are the encampments, right? Where is the kind of scary stuff you see in some other public spaces? And the reason is the activation. And so what we really have to do in making neighborhoods safer, besides having the appropriate responsiveness, is designing our way into livable neighborhoods. And that's everything from the services we offer people to how our neighborhoods look in terms of their beauty, in terms of the cleanliness, in terms of activating and allowing for more foot traffic. A really good example of that would be what's happened with the Lincoln District. I mean, back when I was on council, we had the Lincoln Revitalization Project. We improved the infrastructure, which led to the investment of the new Starbucks, the new Patsy Sir affordable apartments there. We have even more festivals like Lunar New Year, other activations of the space. And so safety really means, and we see this in other neighborhoods too, like around the east side, safety means having livable neighborhoods where people feel safe to walk around, actually use the space, walk their kids around, walk their dogs, and not constantly fear for their safety and not fear what's going to happen. So we have to design our way moving forward. And that also means smart policies, like working with our municipal court to have greater focus on reducing recidivism, especially with youth.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question one more time.
Public safety is top of mind for many, but community members also call for approaches rooted in compassion and equity. What does a safe Tacoma look like to you, and how will you balance accountability with prevention and trust building?
Well, something I like to say is that our goal as a city should be that when you call for help, the right person shows up at the right time with the right services to serve you. So I'm the executive co-sponsor of the Pierce County Opioid Task Force, and that's something we talk a lot about, which is the goal is that you have the right service at the right time when the person needs it. So when we think about safety from the city side, we'll start with kind of the response, like, so when you call for help, right? So we've really worked to try to broaden not just police and fire, but our HOPE team out of the fire department that responds to people experiencing mental health crisis, our community service officers, which are designed to handle non-emergency, violent calls, right? So trying to provide different avenues for which you can get the services you need. We have our HEAL team, which works directly with outreach with people experiencing homelessness, right? Because at the end of the day, police and fire probably aren't the best for those. So we want to make sure that we have an alternative response model that can best meet the needs of people when they call for help. That being said, I do think that if we think about safety, it's also about investing in communities too. It's about how do we make sure that we as a city are being outwardly facing as a whole organization and really working to address some of the issues communities identified. So the crime plan that Chief Moore put forward in the Hosmer area has a good example where instead of just police showing up, it was public works, it was environmental services, it was economic development. It was all these parts of the organization talking to the neighbors and saying, what is it that would make you feel safer here? What is it would be make it more successful to run a business, to address some of the issues you're seeing, and really being driven by that. And so I'd really like to see it flipped on its head. And then this question, really working with communities to ask them the question, what would make you feel safer, and what would that look like? And then looking at our response models and looking at the investments we make to best try to meet those needs. Because we often say that people feel safe for different reasons in communities. And so we should get better at understanding what they would like to see and not just assume and respond accordingly.
And we had a lot of feedback at the Hilltop Street Fair. We had note cards that community members filled out. Just we asked what they would do with $1 million. Is that what we asked? Yeah. And a lot of people talked about the roads, the conditions of the roads. And we all know they need a lot of work, especially for our friends who need ADA wheelchair access. like our friend Matisse back there. And so with the failure of Streets Initiative 2, I'm getting that right, we could say that was a lack of trust or just the feel of economic burden, one or the other. What is your strategy to try to either earn the trust or improve the roads in a way that's more economical for the community members?
Yeah. Well, since I was on the council when this passed, I'm not going to make assumptions about what this lack of trust thing. When I talked to people, I said, "Hey, John, here's the deal. The state's raising our taxes. You're talking about raising our taxes. I feel too much of a burden. I want to fix the streets, but I'm feeling under pressure." And I think what we need to really do is we need to re-examine the value proposition we're making to folks. One thing we didn't do, and that I would do as a mayor, is from day one, go out and start working with organizations, groups of people saying, "Hey, you believe the roads are falling apart, the sidewalks are broken. I agree with you. What would it look like to really reimagine this? What would you want to see?" And start working to get pre-buy-in ahead of time before any package comes forward, understanding kind of what's going on. I'm a big fan, as people know, about fixing sidewalks. There's too many broken, busted, incomplete, derelict sidewalks in the city. Councilman Walker and I passed 15% of the Transportation Benefit District money going specifically to fix sidewalks in the city. We're looking at expanding a sidewalk utility at the state level to really try to lean in and fix the sidewalks, because it is a problem. Too many people are being harmed on our sidewalks. So it's the roads, it's the sidewalks, it's talking to groups, no matter how they get around the city, and understanding, like, what does it look like? And then coming back with a package that we think people could support. We are talking about impact fees right now as a city of Tacoma. It's something we don't have. So as new development comes forward, how do they pay for some of the impacts that they're having on the infrastructure? That's another way we can have funding that doesn't burden our citizens to help rebuild some of the infrastructure we're seeing. I think there's lots of different ways we can do it. But first and foremost, I think we need to go out and talk to the public and understand, like, what are the issues you see? What's the challenges, and how do we fix it in a way that's quicker, more responsive, and more driven by them? And I think we need to be doing that all the time. The city does not do a good job of running campaigns. I'll just be really honest. The school district does a great job of it. The park district does a great job of it. Why? They run them all the time. I'd like the city running campaigns all the time. Smaller packages, but more frequently, giving you an opportunity to say, "Yep, I saw you did the work, and I trust you again." And so I think that renewed cadence would be really good as we think about addressing the infrastructure.
Well, partly it comes down to very poor communication. I mean, the campaign for the roads measure started less than a month before the ballot measure by many accounts. And a lot of people that I know personally who were great voters or actually fairly economically comfortable, who are liberal and support these types of things, they voted it down because they weren't sure what was going to happen. And as much as economic anxiety, you can't remove it from the conversation. People really need to know what the value proposition even is before they can have the conversation. And I think that was just lacking. The same thing with the fire levy right before. And these are services that people really value too. People value public safety. They value people being able to respond when there's an emergency. They want their roads to not be jacked up. They want us to actually have the infrastructure to attract the employers, to attract the kind of economic investment that we want to see. But actually following through with a real clear plan, I think that was just at its most basic essentials lacking. I was actually having a conversation with a higher up at Parks Tacoma, for example, and one of the conversations and one of the issues I'd actually like to put forward, similar to the rather successful partnership between the city and the school district called Safe Routes to Schools, which is just what it sounds like. It's safety improvements so that you can actually have things like sidewalks, and so kids don't have to take their life into their own hands when they try to go to school, for example. Why not have something similar with a Safe Routes to Parks? And they're so co-located anyway. And if we took it a step even further, if we actually had more of a partnership model for these types of approaches where the voters could actually see there's some efficiencies to be gained, like we could actually have really nice things for people in all of our neighborhoods, not just the places with privilege, but well-maintained, state-of-the-art corridors, for example, to the parks that our kids want to use more of, to our schools. Could we marry it to our housing goals as well? Could we marry it to our newly passed Home in Tacoma code, for example, to activate more spaces for the housing that we need to drive rent down, to make first-time homeownership opportunities more available for folks? Basically, can we tie even better and more wins to it so people can really see the return on investment, and trying to do a few things really well than trying to do the peanut butter approach and try to be everything to everyone? I think that's why we failed, and that's what we can do better.
I'm going to collect note cards if you guys filled them out. Yes. Oh, you're taking notes? Oh.
She's 82. I gotta hang out with my mom.
Yeah, you do. Okay. And there was something similar on there as well. They are asking, but she wanted, can you summarize it a little shorter than this?
Sure. As mayor,
In the microphone.
as mayor, what can you do to ensure that Sound Transit meets their obligation to the city of Tacoma? I mean, right now we're hearing Bruce Harrell make noises about West Seattle. They're making noises about extending to Boeing and Everett. It feels like there's a real chance that they're gonna totally forget about us down here in Tacoma. We paid a lot of money, and we feel like we deserve these services as well.
Sure. So that's where the experience matters, along with the relationship building. So one of those little peculiarities of Sound Transit is that the sales taxes that are raised locally stay locally. So it's not like Tacoma sales tax dollars are subsidizing King County stuff or vice versa. So money that we pay goes to stuff here. That being said, the allocation of the labor side of the equation, the actual skilled expertise, the engineering, the attention, where and how we apply for grant money, because so many of these large capital projects are dependent on federal grants. Dear, that's very discouraging right now in some respects. But what we can do, and I think the role of the mayor, which historically is a Sound Transit board member, can do is not just make this about the immediate, not look at it so combatively and not look at it as just this immediate hurdle of what is the Seattle mayor doing or what is the Sound Transit board doing, but try to look for shared interest in areas of overlap. So regionally, for example, working with our state delegation, for example, or regional partners, people who have a real stake, for example, in connectivity between the airport and the Link Light Rail, for example, bringing more of those interests into the equation. I mean, as a professional negotiator myself, people don't negotiate principles, they negotiate interest, right? So looking for those shared areas of overlap. That's the approach I bring to contentious issues like what's happening with scarce grant dollars or scarce funding, scarce personnel at our agencies like Sound Transit. And that's the same approach I'd bring, for example, when we're looking at federal overreach with the Trump administration's weaponization of grant money, for example. I think it's a false choice between, on the one hand, just knuckling under and completely capitulating, or on the other hand, just being Don Quixote and tilting at windmills and just being an army of one and just having a principled stand. I think we have other options. And the best option is teamwork. The best option is working with the people at all the levels who have a shared stake in success and just using the position to rally the people.
It's a good question. I have been watching Bruce Harrell be really active about that. But again, the piece that was true about Bruce is he can say that, but he's just one vote on the Sound Transit board, right? So he can advocate for it, but he's just one. The mayor has historically been the Sound Transit board member. Currently, that's served by Christina Walker because of her expertise in transit. I mean, the mayor will have to make a choice about whether or not they're going to step back into that role. I really have a lot of respect for Christina Walker, and I think she does a good job and is a good leader. Another mayor may choose to push her out of the spot and take it over, but I think she does a good job. I think the critical piece for us is whenever the light rail gets here, the investment, the working with the community, the due diligence it takes, like working with us to ensure it gets here, making sure when it lands or is on its way that local people are helping build the project, that the businesses that are being impacted are engaged and come away whole. I think that's what the mayor needs to do right now. I also think where the mayor needs to advocate, and I'm on the Pierce Transit Board, Sound Transit is trying to stop running express buses from Tacoma to Seattle because what they want is they want us to run our buses to Federal Way, get on the light rail and go. So as your mayor and as a Pierce Transit Board member, I am fighting that right now. We need express buses to get people from Tacoma to the University of Washington to downtown Seattle. Now, I'd love it if more of those people worked in the city of Tacoma, but I don't want our people needing to get on a bus and get off in Federal Way and go up there. And so that's an area where I think we need an advocate right now, working with that along with Executive Mello, Board Member Hunter George, and all of our delegation down here really leaning in and saying, hey, we've paid for this, we deserve it, we need the services. And the buses right now is I think the big one we have to fight for.
Thank you. Tacoma has one of the lowest tree canopies in the state, and actually in the central Tacoma area is one of the lowest in Tacoma. What is your definition of green pathways, and how do you see Parks Tacoma playing a role in that and increasing the tree canopy?
Well, I think one of the side effects of, or one of the benefits of Home in Tacoma is we are requiring a lot of tree planting. And we're requiring a lot of tree planting, and we're incentivizing people that when they redevelop, they keep trees on their property. So we are going to see a lot of trees being planted in our city. I think that's something I'm very excited about, is how we're going to grow our canopy, even as we're growing housing. And I think we've got a good path forward. I'd like us to see more. I'd like to make commitment that in my 4 years on the council, planting somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 trees in the city of Tacoma. I think we can do it. I think we can find partners and really lean into it. But not only is it just planting trees, it's maintaining and taking care of the trees. And I think that's where the partnership with the Park District could really land. As Anders mentioned, being more partner, looking at ways that we can work together to maintain the trees that we have, right? The city needs to take responsibility for right-of-ways and making sure those trees not only are planted, but grow into maturity and provide the shade we want to see. But we could work with the Park District to really do that. And as we talk about safe routes to parks, safe routes to schools, can we think about how those partnerships can plant trees so that you're walking in shade? Because as you walk around the city, there are parts of our city where there's plenty of tree canopy. And as you walk on a summer day, it's nice and cool. In other places, it's stark. It's really hot. There's no trees. I grew up in the South End, and over by the mall, it's really bad. So we need to be really deliberate about planting trees. And getting that tree canopy back up. I think we have some tools for Home in Tacoma, but I'd like to see us do even more. And the real issue is, how do we make sure that once they're planted, they're taken care of? And that's the partnership with Metro Parks and thinking about getting more of these pathways that are supported, and that I'm really excited about leading on and doing as the mayor. I have ideas about how to pay for this too, which I won't talk about right here, but like that's another critical thing, is it's not just planting the trees, it's how do you pay for those trees? And I'll be talking, some legislation will be coming out shortly. I'm a councilman right now to talk about what that might look like.
So there's a terrible lack of clarity. That's why Tacoma has the worst urban forestry of any of our peer cities in the region. I mean, we set this lofty goal of 30 by 30% tree canopy by 2030, and just nowhere close, right? It is so disgraceful that you can pretty accurately guess what neighborhood you're in just by Google Street View, by just asking 2 questions: where are the trees, where are the sidewalks? Compare UPS to, say, around the mall, for example, or even some parts of central Tacoma, right? And so there's clarity, yes, and there's partnerships, but there's also just adequately leading by example. So our urban forestry team is just an army of one. It's a really admirable guy named Mike Carey, and he's doing some really amazing work, but the lack of follow through, and also just the lack of clarity about what trees in the first place, and also who is going to pay. So I think it's really commendable that we're going to have the funding discussion, but also all of the people that I've spoken to in the different neighborhoods who do support the trees, for example, but they've seen trees that the city planted years ago, for example, and great, there goes my sidewalk, or there goes my sewer. So something I think might be really good looking into is having like some best practices like we have for EDUs. Like, these are the tree species that are going to be not as disastrous for the infrastructure, but also good for our canopy goals. Also reimagining what canopy even is. So does canopy always have to be a tree, or can it be more like grasses or rain gardens, for example? There are some cities called pollinator cities, which is really interesting, where they can actually get greater net carbon reduction because some grasses actually store the carbon in their roots versus the leaves, like trees do, for example. So that's one such example. Also much better for our water system, much easier to maintain. And especially if you look at Parks Tacoma, and if you look at surplus properties owned by the city of Tacoma, the county, the school district, if we could just move away from lawns in general, or just try to move that example along and incentivize the city of Tacoma residents as well. And we could work with the Pierce Conservation District, as well as other grassroots organizations like the Tree Foundation and others. We could have a 1-2 punch of carbon reduction, as well as improving our stormwater goals, as well as the heat island effect as well. So just being more creative and following through, and actually appropriately resourcing these programs.
I can read most of your question. It's a good one. You know what it is. Yep.
My name is Courtney Weimer. I'm pretty involved with the mental health courts and the therapeutic courts in Pierce County. Anders, you brought up the Tacoma Community Court, which is a great program, but Tacoma reaches I know Tacoma is a city, but Tacoma reaches further into the county. And there's also felony therapeutic courts, which are hugely needed in Tacoma. Mental health court is funded through the city and through the county. I had a fundraiser set up with Tacoma Business Council and a lot of businesses in the area, and got shut down by the city to help provide funding to mental health court, which I was very frustrated about. So I want to know, how do you guys, are you aware of the therapeutic courts in the county above Tacoma Municipal Court, and how do you feel about funding those? And how would you feel about community and business engagement funding those therapeutic courts in the county?
Well, thank you, Courtney. The answer is yes. We need an absolutely all of the above approach to funding these services. I am aware of and incredibly supportive of these therapeutic courts, and I think that they're the model for further expansion and scaling. What I've told people at the door and what people are telling me in the spirit of reciprocity is we are already paying for these services. It's just in the most cases we're paying in the form of the emergency room or the jail. Right. So we might as well actually get something for what we're paying and actually help human life as opposed to just perpetuating a problem. So I'm absolutely open to those conversations, especially just, and this is the recurring theme, right? Kind of being a broken record, but just in the wake of all of this federal chaos, and it's probably not being out of the woodwork yet, right? But with budget deficits, with the punitive measures against blue states or sanctuary, this, that, or the other, or whatever. I mean, things that we could have reasonably counted on are more in question. And so the need for local resiliency and regional resiliency, which includes community funding, civil society, just everything should be on the table, right? And not only is that good for meeting our immediate goals, because I think one life saved and living better is a victory, right? But think of the lessons we can learn, right? I mean, if you look back in history 100 years ago with the Great Depression and the New Deal, a lot of the programs that became just the bedrock of our life, and just mom and dad not having to work in their 80s, right? Like Social Security, Medicare back in the 60s, started with small scale experimentation at the state level, at the regional level, and people realized they worked and it was scaled up appropriately. So I'm pro innovation 100%, and I think we should do the opposite of ruling things out and saying no. I think we should ask for forgiveness rather than permission right now, and just help human beings learn and scale. And thanks for fundraising. We could talk more about that.
Yeah, I have lots of questions about why that happened. We should chat more about that. I mean, so since I've been on the council, we set up our therapeutic court right in the municipal court, and we set up our community court in the municipal court, which are doing good jobs. I wish we could get more people into those, which is a whole other question about how we get people connected to them. And felony mental health court, and I think that is another piece of this, right, where we also have the felony mental health court. So we need to not only do our city one, but how do we partner with the county around that too? And I think that is a clear partnership we're going to have to strike in trying to move people towards that. Because I think what we lose, one of the challenges I've seen is, while the court system, there's people who have challenges with the criminal justice system, there is also a way for them to hook people into services and get them resources they need if we can really push that. So I'd really like to see us not only support our municipal courts for misdemeanors, but also for felony court. Could we pay? Could we help out? Could we invest in that? I think fundraising, if people want to do it, it's great. I think in this time, as Anders mentioned, we can be less dependent upon the federal government to help us out. We really have to look to each other, right? And I think there's a conversation of like, if people are willing to help and be part of the solution, we need to allow them to be part of the solution. Even if there's a risk or we're concerned about it, I think we need to lean into our community as more, because there are people who want to help. They want to do more. They want to be part of the process. And I think if we can do that, we can have so much more of an impact. So I think it'd be really good to see us do more of that. And I think I'm going to the felony mental health drug court next week to see the graduation ceremony. So I'm going to be very excited to kind of see that and learn more about it. It's definitely underutilized. Yes.
If elected mayor of Tacoma, what actions would you take to strengthen alliances with other area government officials to protect residents from federal overreach like we're seeing in other major cities?
Divided we fall, united we stand. I mean, I think that's something we need to do. I have been talking to our mayor. I'd really like to see us stand up an intergovernmental kind of response to the federal government body among all the cities, the county, the city of Tacoma, and all the other cities and counties in Pierce County. I'd like to see us stand up something and think about how we respond to this, because we are We have a lot of challenges. Tacoma has been very good at getting federal funding and getting grant funding to pay for a lot of projects. So we're really at risk. We also have a very large military installation just outside of here, which we are more dependent upon federal funding than lots of other places. So we need to come together as a region and talk about, well, what is the threat and how do we stand up to that threat to make sure we get our funding that we're deserved? How do we push back in areas where there's overreach? And I think if we do that as a region and not as an individual, it helps so that we don't get pressured just one at a time. And so that's something I'd really like to see us take a more proactive role here, and also working with our state and our attorney general, who has been very proactive in this. I think we can really lean into that as much as we can, but we need a regional leader. And that's something I really want to do as the mayor, is be that regional leader and work with our county executive to think about how we respond to the federal overreach we're seeing. And I think we do have a unique role in that because the Northwest Detention Center is located inside the city of Tacoma. And so we have to be very clear about our leadership and our responsibilities to our community because of that. And I would like to, so I'm very eager to take a more proactive role in this conversation. I think we do need to make sure we're focusing on how we serve our residents, right? Not, as Anders said, tilting at windmills and going off in things that don't benefit our folks, but we have people we have funding that can hurt folks that are potentially being cut. We have people in our community that are being harmed. And so we have to step forward and be really clear about that.
So this is where credibility, where we come back to that theme, right? Because it's one thing to align with our partners and to stand up against the federal administration, which in some cases is really just performative. I mean, we can say whatever we want, right, and write a resolution or whatnot. And then there are things happening locally right here in our backyard affecting Tacomans, and people have seen just the palpable silence, right? I mean, John mentioned the GEO group. So recently, since the GEO group is a for-profit private entity contracting with ICE, there was litigation about the fact that this for-profit Washington state business was paying their detainees $1 per hour, right? Just in total violation of state minimum wage law. And the attorney general, first Bob Ferguson and now Nick Brown, prevailed in the appellate court level, saying you can't have it both ways. You have to pay your people the state minimum wage, right? So where was the city in this in terms of, at a minimum, filing an amicus brief, right? I mean, I'm not saying that we have to actually, have our day in court, right? But at a minimum, trying to lend our resources and actually taking the fight to them for once, not just constantly being on the defense. An opportunity that presents itself now with more unfortunate kind of head in the sand passivity is the sheriff. I mean, we currently, unfortunately, have a sheriff who is brazenly violating state and local law right now, saying he's openly going to collude with ICE to round people up in violation of people's constitutional rights. Where is the city in partnering with Executive Mello and the county council right now in enforcing basic county law and the Keep Washington Working Act, right? Where's their delegation, and where's the city in leading or at least partnering with these kinds of things? I actually visited the GEO facility yesterday. I was invited by members from an organization. I'll leave their names blank, but I spoke with detainees. I actually spoke with someone who had a green card legally for 5 years. He married someone from Texas. He was awaiting his citizenship hearings. He was scooped up by ICE in his citizenship hearing, right? That was a person I spoke to, a human being, flesh and blood, face to face, right? Also, frankly, just having leadership that can call things what they are. This is fascism. We need people who can actually say that the emperor has no clothes and can actually not evade, not hem and haw, but actually just speak in plain language that people understand, because people need to know where their leaders' hearts are.
How will you address bottlenecks to building more housing, and how would your approaches differ from one another?
So there's a lot of things that we can tackle here. I'm a housing person myself, right? So what's really intriguing is back in the 1990s, Tacoma actually used to have a deal, and I think, Terry, you might remember this, where we would give you a permit and clear it up within 60 days, and if you didn't do it, the permitting fee is on us. Remember that back in the day? So why does it take a year and a half to get a short plat? Especially if we have these lofty goals like Home in Tacoma of generating more housing, for example, more first-time homeowner types of opportunities, more rental housing for Tacoma families. If it's so cost prohibitive and the federally imposed inflation from the tariffs and on materials, on labor, from all the rounding up by ICE, all of the associated more expensive financing because of all these chaotic conditions. It's the margins for building things have never been tighter. And the one thing that we can control, because we can't control the market, is local time. So rules matter, right? It shouldn't be the Wild West. We should have well-built, well-constructed things that meet our standards. But can we work more collaboratively to infinitesimally speed up the rate of permitting, to actually have a more collaborative approach, and also to be more creative too? I mean, the classic example for the building code, not just land use, but just how these things are built, is the need for second egress stairs. I mean, that's like a really classic urban design foible, where if you have more than 10 units, you have to have 2 egress stairs, because back in the early 1900s, when you had these shoddily built tenement housing, they burned down a lot and people needed extra ways of escaping. Whereas now we have modern insulation and we have these things called sprinklers. So, and not only is that something that adds a layer of cost, and that's just one such example, but it also really dramatically limits the floor plan, so that most of the new construction that you see that's past a certain scale, it's mostly studios and 1-bedrooms. And how many Tacoma families are going to rent a 1-bedroom renting for $2,500 a month, right? So that's one of the bigger problems, that it's not just about expanding the total amount of housing. It is, but it's the biggest bottlenecks, which are rentals for families and first-time home buyer opportunities, right? So we need smaller, more affordable starter homes. We need larger, more family-conducive rental properties, and actually looking at the code and benefiting from the lived experience of residents and builders is essential. That's what I'll do.
Yeah, no, as someone who's been deeply involved with kind of updating the code for the last 3 or 4, since I came on to council, we started talking about it. I think you're going to see a little bit of alignment here, which is just the idea that the thing that we can control is the box, the dirt, and what can be built there, and then how fast you can get permits and move through. So something I'd really like to see us do is kind of speed through permits. I was the person who pioneered the ADU accelerator program, right? Which is, ADUs are really popular. People want to see them. So I'm the one who put the money behind pre-approved plans, site development costs, so that ADUs get built faster, right? So I have clear examples of where I've leaned in, put money and policy in place to move things forward. And I'm really excited for more of that. And I have lots of ideas about how we get more duplexes, more triplexes, more family size units, more large units done. I've been a real leader on the multifamily tax exemption program and like trying to make sure that's more reflective of what we want to see: more affordability, more family size units, more mid-sized buildings that can kind of be those kind of entry-level places that give you a spot between like your single-family house and your large apartment that kind of help neighborhoods feel better, right? So clear policies around that I've really led on in the last 5 years, right? There's a lot of ideas out there of like, we could do this and we could do that, but I have clear examples of things I've done while I was on the council to really kind of move that forward that weren't existent before I got there. And so I think that I really would like to continue the opportunity to really push on this and work with businesses, work with developers, work with homeowners to understand kind of more what they want to see in their neighborhoods, work with the environmental community so we can think about how we not only just build homes, but build neighborhoods that make well. How do we work and build the infrastructure that matches it? And so it's a policy piece, permanent timelining and speed, kind of making sure it moves quicker. And then also like looking at how we bring the community in to have that conversation. And that's something that wasn't happening before I got on the council in lots of ways. So we're really diving in and really changing the policies to move this stuff forward. It just really kind of happened more recently. And so I would really like to get the opportunity to keep doing that work.
What are some of your favorite Tacoma Art Month events, and what are your what are your plans to support the arts?
I was a council member who was on the Arts Commission when I first started on the council. My son and daughter go to the art school, which is Grant Center for the Expressive Arts. So I'm a big art patron. Arts at the Armory is something I'm very excited about every year. That's part of Arts Month. I love the studio tours. I think that's really great. I'm a big booster of the Proctor Arts Fest, but that's in the summertime. It's not part of Arts Month, I know. But I think that's something that's really good. I think actually arts are really kind of what helped make Tacoma be a little special place. Right? We have always had kind of this gritty blue collar city, but we also have this real art flair and art passion and kind of entrepreneurial spirit that I love. And I think we really do a good example of showing how a city that works hard can also be beautiful. And so I'm really excited about Arts Month coming up, and I'll be out and about a lot of these activities.
So a little point of personal privilege here. I was in the first soda class, and so a little bias there, but super big fan of not just simply the grittiness of Tacoma and just how art has made Tacoma, right? And not just a medium-sized West Coast city, but something that's really uniquely our own, but it's something that really transforms and even saves lives. Literally in my case, right? Like I was a pretty bummed out, chaotic stadium kid, and then soda opened, and then game changer, right? And not to mention that, but just the game changer for the activation of the downtown as well. So, I mean, I'm in very big support of what's called the Artists in Residence program, and that's operational throughout the year as well as Arts Month. I remember being active and actually helping with some of the glass blowing down at the Museum of Glass, and just seeing the activation of that space and seeing kids from different walks of life being given that amazing opportunity. And I think that there are actually some unorthodox opportunities that we should really look into. I mean, one of the perennial questions that it's almost like a rite of passage you get asked as a candidate is, what are you going to do about downtown? And so there are a number of problems with downtown, but one of the solutions that some cities are looking into, which I would love to explore, is actually being very targeted and actually having some subsidized housing for artists, and not even just downtown, but if you look at places that are starting to be kind of up and coming, like South Tacoma Way, for example, starting to get a music scene, and starting to get like a nightlife around like the cantina and the airport, and that part of up to 56th. Are there people, the quote creatives who don't, have the money of the tech bros necessarily, but actually add the real character and vibrancy to an area? Because back to safety, right? Activation of space, kind of that cool kid factor. That's what could really enliven some of these areas, and kind of in a 1-2 punch achieve our affordability goals at the same time. So besides talking about how arts are amazing and awesome, arts can literally save not just one person's life, but potentially even entire neighborhoods. And I think the city should explore that.
We're going to close out our time with this question. Mayor Woodard started the Mayor's Youth Commission. What are your thoughts on the commission, and how do you see the commission play a role in your administration if you're elected?
I was 25 when I was first elected. So, I mean, I have talked with people who first got engaged, and there are actually a couple of candidates who are running this year who first got their involvement in the Youth Advisory Council. So I definitely support the role of adding more, as well as more broadly defined youth roles for our committees and commissions. But I think probably, frankly, the biggest thing we can do to serve our youth and to thereby serve our leadership pipeline is making sure that the relationship between city staff and committees and commissions itself is improved. So one of the areas of concern that I hear from folks, I mean, some examples include like the Sustainable Tacoma Commission, for example, committees like the some of the other commissions, members of the commissions that I spoke to, where people were told inaccurate information by staff, for example, about the role, for example, making sure that people actually feel listened to, included, and empowered, rather than just being there to have your head petted, look at you, you have something for your resume, right? It was the Immigrants and Refugees Task Force. That was the other one that I spoke with. So we have to have just real clarity about what the role of these commissions is. Is it just window dressing, or is it actually like real true blue policy recommendations to inform policymakers for making actual decisions that improve people's lives? I mean, that's how you really turn young people on to politics and civic engagement, is power, is authority. That's why when I was in my second term on council, I successfully sponsored the participatory budgeting program, which included Role for Youth. It fed people, gave them childcare while they were making real decisions impacting their neighborhoods, real capital improvements. It was unfortunately defunded, but I think the skeleton is there to revive it, right? But it's not rocket science that if you give people an actual say, and you take the risk of surrendering some of your control to give people a little bit more responsibility and authority, people will rise to those expectations. And what better example than our youth? So not just simply the advisory council and the roles, but just having better functioning committees and commissions that do their job and actually have real authority.
Oh, this is a great question. And I'm very excited about the Mayor's Youth Commission and what we can do there. As an analog, I want to talk about what I've done with seniors, right? So my policy made it so that we're going to prioritize having seniors on each one of our commissions, boards, and committees. And one of the things we talked about when we did that was I was talking about creating a senior committee. And the reason we got away from that was like, well, if you create a senior committee, will they come out? Could they become isolated where they just talk about senior issues? Or isn't it more important to have seniors as part of every committee, sharing their perspective and bringing it in? So I thought that was really great, and that's why we moved to the senior kind of seat. So when I think about the Mayor's Youth Commission, I love it. I want to keep it going. One thing I want them to do is I want them to have a project. I want them to do something, and then I want to put some money behind it. So if they do a project, we have some money, we can make an investment, and they can actually see that they did something. But number two, I don't want them just to be part of the Youth Commission. I want part of the rule seeding them into our Planning Commission, into our Transportation Commission, into our Landmarks Preservation Commission. I want it to be a training ground for further involvement, and I want to be really deliberate about it. My friend is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. They have a program called Rise Up Tulsa, which is all about helping young people get experience, get on boards, and then move into nonprofit leadership, move into government roles. And that's what I'd really like to see, is like reimagine it to where it's really helping youth grow and move forward. The other point I would say is, like, I do agree with our commissions, boards, committees. We need to go back and think about giving them clear roles and expectations. We had a few that were set up before my time that didn't have really clear roles and expectations when they were started. And we need to go back and say, hey, here's kind of what we want you to work on. Here's your space and where you fit here. So they have a real clear space where they can plug in and inform the council. And that's something I'm thinking a lot about as the next mayor, is really having true transformative, not transactional engagement with some of these commissions, where we're not like, you're giving us stuff and we're giving you things in return, but we're working together, walking alongside, really trying to change things. And that's something I would really like to do as the next mayor.
All right, and now you guys have 3 minutes apiece to close out.
Yeah. You've heard a lot from me so far. And first of all, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to have you here. You know, the close that I like to make is, right, when I think about what the role of the mayor is, the mayor's job is to be the captain of the team and really lead the city council going forward. And what that means is you have to be able to work with your colleagues to move something forward, to be part of the team, to help them grow themselves, and to have them really think of you as the leader. And right now, most of my colleagues are supporting me because they think I should be the next mayor of the city council. But that doesn't mean that I'm wedded to the status quo. That doesn't mean that I think there's nothing that should be fixed. I think there's lots of things to be fixed. And guess what? I've been on the council for the last 5 years, so I know all the things that need to be fixed. I know what needs to be changed. I know I have clear ideas about what I want to do, and I'd love to talk to you all about things I would do differently. And I think that's really important, is having someone who's been there, who has support of their colleagues, knows where things are, and can really lead the change. You know, I've been on the council for the last 5 years, and I got on council and there were lots of issues that I had to deal with. Homelessness was not solved before I got here. Public safety was not solved before I got here. Infrastructure was not solved before I got here. There were lots of challenges that have been handed off to me that I am working through to try to address. The status quo was not great when I got here, but I've been doing everything I can to really make it better as I move forward. And I think if you point and look at my history and what I've achieved, you can see clear things that I've done with what I was handed to when I came into. And I'll continue to take that work going forward, working with my colleagues, trying new innovative things. Because I think we need to try things differently. And I think we need to think about how we make Tacoma the best city it can be. And I'm ready to go. Hit the ground on day one and start leading. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so very much for your great questions, as well as just for caring, for your involvement. So for me, this race is really just fundamentally about the question of, do we move forward? Do we embrace big, bold new ideas, or do we just settle for more of the same? I mean, as a lifelong Tacoman who's witnessed these things myself, as well as just having had the privilege of speaking with over 14,000 households personally in all the different neighborhoods, there's such a perception of being at the cusp of greatness, and not just greatness in a zero-sum sense of bright and shiny new things for people being priced out of King County and then gentrification for everyone else, but greatness that lifts the entire tide, lifting all the boats. But that kind of constant perennial Tacoma problem of snatching victory, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, right? So, and we've seen this, and that kind of explains our frailty, like our cycles of success and then failure, right? Like we finally start to turn a corner, and then there's the 2008 housing crash, or there's finally some progress, and then there's COVID, and so forth. And every time that happens, there's still some progress, but so many more people feel more and more left behind. That's why it's increasingly, there are people in some neighborhoods paying up to half of their monthly rent, their monthly income towards the rent, for example. There are people waiting 45 minutes to an hour for a 911 response if they see one at all. And for me, what success looks like isn't just simply metrics. It's human beings feeling more trust in their city government, and it's feeling like they're actually seeing measurable, visible follow through and results in their own neighborhoods, whether it's something as visible as just the trash and debris near 705 or near the Pacific Avenue off-ramp, for example, to what happens to that drug house on your street, and is there actually any progress from code enforcement? Is it just, you know, a voicemail that doesn't get answered for 2 weeks, for example? Just basic customer service, but in service to actionable goals, and just having a sense of focus too. I think that's something so many people have said is lacking, is the city trying to be everything to everyone, trying to have this peanut butter approach versus addressing the key issues, addressing the tough questions people are asking, and doing those 2 or 3 core things really, really well for the group, for the benefit of all, for those measurable, visible benefits that people see in their neighborhoods. That's my commitment to you, is not getting it right for every single time, not necessarily trying to please everyone or be everything to everyone, but making sure that you know what you're getting, that there's reliable follow through, and that you can trust the city to follow through. Thank you so much for your consideration. There's a bunch of my cards on the table too.
All right. Thank you both for, spending your time here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your willingness to engage. So yeah, thank you for your time. And thank you everybody for showing up. I'm so excited about the engagement and everybody coming. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Sean, always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, John.